For those of you that don't know me, my name's Mark Webb. I'm been with the Yacht Club about 6 years, and I normally sail a laser on a Friday night when I can, and also own Cafe Del Mar. I've got the picture in the background, and just our cruising yacht. We usually try and race the twilights when work permits as well on a Wednesday night. I'm also a marine pilot. I've been a pilot in the port for the Port Authority for just over 10 years now. So obviously I get to see both sides of the story, from the yacht's perspective and from the ship's perspective as well. So what I've done, I've got a small PowerPoint. I promise I won't bore you to death. I'm just going to work out how to put it on there. I think I'm good now. I can just click buttons and things will happen. All right, so the PowerPoint's pretty short. It's mainly just to keep me on track so I don't waffle along. But I thought I'd just give you an overview of what a lot of you probably already know, but some of you may not, about pilotage in Newcastle. The Port of Newcastle, contrary to what Newcastle Herald says, is increasing, like in terms of the shipping. So at the moment we've got approximately 4,500 ship movements a year, bearing in mind that's in and out. And any commercial vessel that's greater than 30 metres at the moment requires a pilot. We've got 22 pilots on the books, and I'm slowly increasing the knowledge and enthusiasm of the sailors in the group. I think there's only about 4 of us, or there's probably only 2 when I started, and I've been dragging them out on twilight races when I can, whoever's available, and trying to get them a bit more enthused so they're not the cranky pilots and we're just the annoying yachtsmen. So hopefully that'll work to our advantage. The Port of Newcastle, or the Port Authority, operates a restricted zone, and that goes all the way from the Hexham Bridge all the way up Throsby Creek and to 3 miles seaward of the harbour entrance, just drawn as a circle on the entrance buoy there. So in conjunction with that, then you've got the Newcastle Cruising Yacht Club, and it operates under an aquatic licence which is issued by Maritime, but overarching Maritime is the Port Authority because they've got jurisdiction over that water. They get to override anything that Maritime does within that zone itself. But the actual aquatic licence is issued by Maritime to the Yacht Club. The Yacht Club obviously operates within commercial waterways, and you're highly visible to the public. So the same as the ships, I don't think there's a port in Australia, there's not many in the world, where public can get as close to ships as what we do. And the same for our sailing as well. Like anybody can basically see what we do in the main horseshoe area or the basin area. So bearing that in mind, it's more as an advantage. It's a positive thing that people can see us and can see the ships and can see the yachts. But the main thing is we've got to keep them apart. So everybody's living happily. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. I've just thrown some random clips together. So I've got some hopefully pertinent pictures in just showing what we see from the actual ships as we come through. So Jack pretty much nailed it with the distances that he was talking about in terms of keeping clear, and we'll touch on a bit of that later on. But the visibility that we're seeing there, even though it doesn't look it, this is just a typical 230 metre long ship, there is a 400 metre blind spot in front of that ship at the moment, and it's really, really hard to predict. So if looking at that video, if you look at probably about where the helipad is, just a bit forward of the helipad is actually where the bow is. But visually, you have this huge overhang out the front, and it's in that area where boats get under and we lose sight of them, and that's when it gets exciting. I'll click on to the next one. Right. So to give you a quick overview of pilotage without boring you to tears, we've got 3 pilot boarding grounds. We've got pilot boarding ground Alpha, Bravo and Charlie. Generally 95% of the ships will go through Bravo and then onto Alpha where they'll get boarded. Charlie's just kept aside for tankers, so we don't get too many of them. All the vessels approach from the southeast, and that's due to the prevailing swell. As the ships come in through the entrance, around the entrance buoy, the swell gets under the quarter of the ships, and they just want to keep rotating. And this is where we have our main problem here, is in the entrance. So all the shipping activity outside the port in 95% of the time will be as that track is shown on that chart. It's all to the southeast. For those of you that do twilight races, you can see that everything up to the north in the area that we play in, it's clear. There shouldn't be many ships at all ever come into that area. So it's a really good course up there. It should be clear of the shipping. Obviously within the harbour, that's something we need to deal with, but outside the harbour, you should generally be clear. For those that race on the Sundays and to the south, you need to be aware that the ships are to the southeast. Now that is to do with the prevailing swell and also due to a helicopter zone that we operate in. So 80% of our transfers on the ships are done by helicopter, and the RAAF has just granted us a small zone to work in, which is to the southeast as well. So if we don't have the ships in that area, we can't get a helicopter onto it because we head into the restricted airspace. So hence the reason even the departing ships will also head to the southeast in order for the pilot to get off. Now, due to the swell problems we're talking about with the rotation, the tugs, you will notice, are also required to passively escort from half a mile off. So as the ships approach the entrance, depending on the size of the ship and the number of allocated tugs, 1, 2 or 3 tugs will actually come out for the last half mile and free run next to the ship doing about 10 knots. So from that area on, definitely from the half mile inwards, which is the special mark that we've all seen our resident seals sit on, from that point in, we are really, really restricted where we can go. We've got to try and keep the vessel not walking sideways in the swell. We've got tugs running hard next to us at pretty much their maximum speed, and we're coming in through at about 8 to 10 knots as well. So in terms of ships, if you do happen to be caught down this southeastern quadrant off the port, just be aware that most of the ships, when they're 1.5 miles off, will be up to 12 knots in speed. So they're big boxes, and you see them, they will come marching over the horizon super quick. Again, 95%, probably even 100% of ships will come through the entrance at 8 to 10 knots, and that's just more to keep control. If you let the speed drop too much in that sort of swell and in the wind, we've only got a 180 metre wide channel to nail it, and the more speed, the more stability in terms of keeping the course. The reason we don't go above 10 knots though is obviously the tugs can't keep up. And if the tugs can't keep up, then if we do have a rudder failure or an engine failure, then they can't help us. By the time they get down to buoys number 3 and 4, which is off the Stockton Ferry Terminal, we've got to go through there at less than 8 knots. So that's basically the speed. Most pilots run between 7 and 8 knots as they come through buoys 3 and 4. So when you're trying to keep out of the way of a ship, it's really important to think about, is it entering the port or is it departing the port? Because entering the port, especially if you're heading out, the passing will happen quickly. The ship will be coming in at sort of 8 to 10 knots, and you'll be heading out at anywhere from 5 to 10 knots yourself, doing whatever speed you're doing. If it's a outbound vessel, loaded generally, the speeds are a lot lower. So by the time they go around that horseshoe area where we start a lot of the races there off Scratchley's, most outbound ships are doing 4 to 5 knots. And then they'll slowly build up speed as they head up towards the entrance. And by the time they exit the port, they'll be doing about 7 knots. And a lot of that's to do with underkeel clearance. The faster they go, the more they squat down, and then we start running out of water. So really important when you have got shipping movements to know what the shipping movements are, and is it inbound or is it outbound? Because outbounds can stay within a racing area for a lot longer than an inbound. An inbound will be through pretty quick. Now, if I click this one. So some of the considerations that for pilots is that we've only got a 180 metre wide channel to come in. Some of the ships we bring in are up to 50 metres wide. And as Jack said before, we've got tugs alongside as well. So if the tugs are alongside us, they've got a beam of 12 metres each on each side. And I'm going to try and do this sum, so up to about 74 metres if the ship has nailed it and we are in the middle. And that then leaves us basically 50 metres either side of us between the buoys on either side if the ship is in the middle. If the ship is over-rotated or been caught by the wind or the swell, it could be a hell of a lot closer to one side of the channel or the other. So the clear message of this is just stay out of the channel. If you see something coming, I think this picture, you can see that was a ship I brought in, and it's only a small ship. It's only 190 metres long, and that was a cruising yacht that had left the yacht club, and he just decided to march straight down the channel. He even had his engine going, so he didn't have any sailing rules, didn't have anything going for him, and he got the long blasts, the 5 short blasts. I had to reduce speed as best I could, and then release the tug to try and chase him away. He held his ground once the tug got there and refused to budge, and I ended up skimming down the number 1 buoy a lot closer than I should have, just to get round him. The tug skipper tried to do the right thing and to say, listen, mate, get clear of the channel, and he decided to let go of a whole bunch of abuse and bits and pieces, which then resulted in a prosecution for him. So it's a lot of it's to do, look, boats do get trapped in the channel. They don't realise just how quickly the ships are moving and how quickly they come down on top of them. And most of the time, if you get tapped on the shoulder by the guys in the launches and the Port Authority or the tugs, yep, no worries. These things happen. Education, next time, be clear of the channel, and that's it. That's the end of the story. So don't be scared if a boat comes up alongside. They may be going to let you know something, that there might be a ship outbound, or don't immediately think you're in trouble. And if they do give you some advice, just follow it, just nod, smile, and agree to it. It's only the ones that really arc up that get the dramas. So inbound ships, 8 to 10 knots, there can be up to 130,000 tonnes displacement coming in. So the tugs aren't attached before they get to about the Stockton Ferry terminal. So we're just trying to keep that vessel in the channel on its own single rudder and single screw, and just applying leeway as we go up there, as we slowly slow down and the tugs make fast. So the long story of that is, if anything gets in our way, we are severely restricted with how we can stop that vessel. Most of the vessels have a big slow speed engine in them, and when I say slow speed, they might redline at 60 RPM. Big fixed pitch props, no gearboxes. So to stop that engine, it will take probably a minute to wind down, and then the whole cams and everything have to reverse within the engine, and then it has to be restarted on air if it will start at that speed at all, because sometimes the drag on the prop. So the option of us coming astern at that speed is fairly negligible, and if it would take minutes. So if you're in our way at that point, all we can do, if there's room, is try and steer around you or release the tug, or we're going to go straight over the top of you. There's just nothing we can do. Once the tugs make fast, then we've got a few more options. So I've put down here swept path due to the wind and swell. So again, arcing on the fact that the channel is fairly narrow in terms of ports in the world, in terms of the size ships we bring in. A 50-metre ship coming in, a 50-metre beam ship coming in, for every 1 degree of leeway it puts on, which happens all the time with wind and swell, it sweeps another 10 metres. So going in a straight line, it's sweeping a 50-metre path down the middle of the channel. If there's 1 degree of leeway, it's sweeping a 60-degree path, a 60-metre path. Up to 4 degrees of leeway, and yeah, you get a 90-metre path, provided the ship is even in the middle at that stage. So keep clear of the channel, because we may need to use all of it. The blind spot is, we say up to 400 metres in front, and it depends on the cargo and the trim of the vessel. Look, container ships will happen in Newcastle, and their blind spots can be up to 700 metres just with the containers, the way they're stacked up. For us, it depends on the size of the ship, the trim, as to how far we can see, but we allow at least 400 metres. A pilot's obligations, number one, is to protect life. So I think any pilot that's been here for any length of time will be able to tell you many stories about vessels disappearing from sight. When a vessel disappears under your sight, under the bow, and bearing in mind that, yeah, maybe 400 metres, but certainly doesn't look like that to us, we are obligated to do what we can to avoid collision. Problem is we can't see the collision because it's gone out of sight. So we rely a lot on the tugs in telling us what to do or where the vessel is, and then it's up to us to try and throw everything at it. So if tugs are made fast by that stage, then it can get quite dramatic. And I think the ones who have been here for a long time have all had stories where they've had to try and stop a ship. So bearing in mind, trying to stop a ship with tugs attached they're putting themselves at great risk as well. They can, each of those tugs is about 7,000 horsepower, generating 70 to 80 tonnes of lift through their lines. So when we have to stop a ship, it's full black smoke, white water, 70 tonnes of force in those lines, which can sometimes rip the bits out of the deck. It can sometimes part the line. It can sometimes stall the engines of the tugs. And then we're stopping engines and we're trying to keep the vessel in the channel at the same time. So for us to lose sight of somebody or someone's in the wrong spot is a big deal for us. We have to start slowing the vessel down, find out where they are, and the stress levels really, really rise. Quite often, they get closer and closer to the tug, say, oh, I'm not sure where he's going to go. You're just throwing everything at it. The ship's crew is starting to freak out around you, and it all gets really quite dramatic. So that's our number one priority, is to try and protect life. We may get to the point where we haven't slowed that ship down enough, but we may hit you at 4 knots if you are in the wrong spot. And we've had cases where we've hit tinnies, and we have hit yachts before that just for whatever reason, kayaks that just feel they can make it, or they're going to think. So instead of doing 8 knots, we've got the ship down to 4 knots, and everything is turning and burning, and it's getting quite dramatic, and everything's pumped up. We get to the point where we ship go out and stop hitting a tinny, or at 4 knots we make the call of, you know what, it's going to be ugly, it's going to hurt, but we're going to bounce off this boat and let it go and try and maintain the integrity of the channel. So anywhere from the entrance to the Stockton Ferry Wharf is rock for us down the side. The channel side, it was all dredged through rock. So if a vessel goes out and runs aground in that thing, it generally, you can pretty much guarantee it will get holed. They've all got heavy fuel oil, single skin, even the tankers right down the back end. So the consequences to the environment is huge. And so a pilot will do everything they possibly can to keep that vessel in the channel. And it also comes then, the final thing is the channel integrity. Obviously, the channel is narrow, and it's the one way in, one way out for the whole Hunter region. Over nearly $3 billion worth of trade travels up and down that channel every year. And various models have showed that depending on where a ship ran aground and what state of loading or ballasting or whatever it was, it could take up to 6 months to get resources down to be able to clear that channel, depending. So worst case scenario, you could have a channel blocked for 6 months and all that trade can't get around it. Or possibly because somebody was in the wrong spot or just wasn't going to get out of the way. So there's 100 scenarios that could happen. So the long story short is to keep that channel clear and everybody will be happy. Now, the other thing to remember too is if a vessel, even on a good day, gets bent out of shape, coming in the wrong position, the pilot will activate a tug at a moment's notice to push, shove as best you can. Obviously, the faster the ship's going, the less effective the tug is, but that doesn't stop pilots quite frequently using tugs to try and keep the vessel in the channel or maintain a better spot. So that tug there actually is a good indication. He's running pretty much flat knacker there. If you picture that suddenly having to square up and push on the hull at 7,000 horsepower, the wash that comes out of that is extraordinary. Again, if you're outside the channel, you'll still feel the wash, but it won't be as bad if you're in the channel and copping that wash. And one of our transfer vessels actually got caught the other day in tug wash, and his engines flamed out in all the wash, and he got swept under the wharf. It caused about $100,000 worth of damage, and obviously he was a very lucky man as the vessel got swept under the wharf just from that wash. And he's a guy that's been working on the harbour for a long, long, long time, but it was just the wrong place at the wrong time. So that's the considerations that we have as a pilot. So obviously then Newcastle Cruising Yacht Club has considerations as well, because basically all our races are started and finished within a commercial channel. And that can be done. That's no problems at all. It's just the most important thing we've got to ensure that all skippers are educated to their obligations in keeping clear of the commercial shipping. Yachts are really unpredictable in their nature, and I think Jack touched on that before, that a lot of the pilots don't fully appreciate yachts. They don't realise just how manoeuvrable they are. So all they see is a yacht just sort of going backwards and forwards, and when really it would be so much easier to just sail straight out of the harbour and kept out of the way. Why is it going backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards to try and get out of the harbour? So likewise, a lot of yacht skippers know their craft is manoeuvrable. They're highly skilled at what they do, and they're quite happy to tack in close because they know at the last minute they're going to flip that thing around and tack out. But again, you need to make your intentions well and truly clear. A good guide is, as the ships come between each set of beacons, if you look and see an inbound ship, if you don't cross the channel before the next set of beacons, that's about 800 or 900 metres, we can clearly see you, and we should be able to clearly see your intentions as well. So there's also a wide range of skill set of skippers with no formal qualification required. One of our pilots had an incident where a catamaran launched over at Stockton and went backwards and forwards up and down the channel and eventually capsized right under the bow. And so the ship was pulled up as best it could, and at the last minute they got it up and they sort of took themselves away. Anyway, that skipper of that catamaran was still playing in the channel when that pilot berthed the ship, and he came and had a chat to them afterwards, trying to do the right thing. And this guy proceeded to give the pilot his full resume of been sailing for 20 years and there was no risk and blah, 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 blah. But that's something we don't know. All we see is a yacht, and it could be someone who's just bought a yacht 2 days ago, never sailed before, but thought we'd give it a crack. Or it could be someone who's been sailing for 40 years. There's no minimum qualification for yachts and skippers to be out on the water. So if everybody just treats the ships with respect and stays well clear, there won't be any issue. There won't be any question of what the pilot especially has to deal with. So an important thing with that, and I've been saying to a few of my friends as well, our channel is obviously quite narrow, in the actual main channel, but the depth of water to the outside of the channel, that's a bit where, especially if you're heading out and the ship's coming in, even on the outbound ships, you want to know how much you can play with. If you can tack up either side of the channel and you know the depth of the water, you can not create problems with the commercial shipping, and it shouldn't stop your race. You should be able to sort of plan ahead going, okay, that's an outbound ship, that's going to be slow. I'm going to be peeling off to the north. I'll see if I can get on that north side of the channel or whatever. So especially now at the moment with delayed starts to sailing seasons and whatnot, if you can go for, even just take your yacht for a motor, you know the depth of your own boat, most of you got chart plotters, and just do a really rough survey of the channel to the north and to the south and work out how much depth you've got to play with in distance. And I know on our boat we've got a contour line which we've just drawn ourselves on the chart plotter. So especially on the south side where there's deep parts and then there's not so deep parts. So when we're tacking or whatever, we can see in the heat of a race how far we can go in safely at our draft and tack around without sort of trying to guess at the time. And that sort of maximises the amount of room you've got to play with outside of the channel. Once the ship's gone, yeah, absolutely, you can use the main channeling and there's no problems there at all. But it's really handy to know how much you've got to play with. The north side, you've got a heap of water. It's a narrower section of water, but it's deep all the way up there. And yeah, it's important just to utilise the aids that you've got and use them to your advantage. That you don't have to upset your race. You just have to slightly change your tactic for the passing of the ship. And it is balancing that competitive nature of a race to the prudent seamanship. I know how it gets on racing yachts. I've done a lot of offshore racing previously, and yeah, look, once the heat of a race is on, it's just like, yep. Oh, bloody ship's going to get him away. Yep, look, the bloody ship is going to be there. But if you can work around that, and everyone else has to deal with it too, and say, right, just have a plan. Right, for the next 5 minutes, we need to move up this north side, then we can tack back across and we'll get this shift here. It does put an added extra in it, but at the end of the day, it's a prudent seamanship that they're after. And it's the prudent seamanship that will keep all the nasty complaints away from aquatic licenses, especially from the Port Authority coming through as well. And again, just be aware of the speed profile of ships of inbound versus outbound. If you're heading out and the inbound ship's coming in, it's fast, you're fast, it'll be over pretty quick. So it shouldn't upset your game plan too much. Outbound ship, a little bit slower, but you might be able to get out in front of it, bearing in mind you just want to keep a regular distance in front of it. But just be aware that's going to be a longer, slower process as it goes out. Just move on to the next slide. So not knowing how I was going to be able to share all this, I've just put some frequently asked questions and things I get asked and a lot of our guys get asked as well. We are trying to promote the Port Authority as not being a nasty Port Authority. We want people to use the channels apart from us. So we're doing some frequently asked questions, and these are ones I've heard sort of around the yacht club. And I'll just run through them. Why can't the shipping schedule be altered to fit known race start times? That's a common one we get. And probably the easiest answer to that is 30% of our ships outbound are constrained by tide. So the big capies, they've got a 90-minute window they have to sail in to have enough water to get the underkeel clearance. So obviously that depends on tide. And even some of the smaller ships they load to a deeper draft, they have to sail at that time. If they can't sail at that time, they'll have to wait 12 hours for the next tidal window. So then leading to that, so if a ship sails in its tidal window, then the next inbound ship is booked, depending on where it's coming from, a certain time period after that to come in. So the whole shipping schedule is based primarily on the tide limited vessels, and then all the inbounds are coming in there. So for us to be able to say, right, we can't, well, let's block out 2 hours on a Sunday at this time, it wouldn't be one size fits all. It might work on one day, it certainly wouldn't work on the next, depending on the tide. So the easiest thing is to do is say, right, the shipping schedule is the shipping schedule, and that's something we've got to deal with. The race officers, I know, do a really good job of checking the actual shipping schedule, and sometimes they will delay or change the race starts to best fit the shipping schedule, but there won't be a perfect fit every time. Another question we get asked is which side of the channel for transits for yachts? So should we go out the south side, should we go out the north side? We really don't care. No, whatever gets you clear of the channel. And just bearing in mind what we were talking about before, that most of the ships operate in the southeast area, that if you do choose the south side, then you may tangle with a ship that's approaching and departing to the southeast. But as long as you're aware of that, that's fine. As long as you're clear of the channel, as long as you give adequate space to the ships in front of them, there won't be any issues. And from our point of view, we certainly don't mind which side of the channel you use, north or south side. What does one long whistle blast mean? If you hear one long whistle, it may be directed at you, it may not be directed at you. But it's basically something, it's a bit like a security of a radio call. There's something happening. Yeah, not sure. It's just like a general nudge to say, everybody, there's boats in the channel, just clear the channel. Once it gets down to 5 short whistle blasts, that's sort of getting a bit more serious. Like there is a boat, it is in the way. If it's you, you need to be out of the way and make a definite bold alteration of course to say that's what you're getting. Generally, from the pilot's point of view, he may activate one of the launchers as well to come and, if he's concerned, to try and clear a path as well, or to have a chat to the offending. This picture here, I don't know if any of you guys can see it. It's obviously an outbound ship, and there's a tug. If you look just to the right of the tug's foremast, there's a boat just sitting there. This wasn't me. This is another pilot who just shared some of the pictures with me. And I don't know if you actually see that he's just starting to fire up that tug. He's just starting to power it up to try and slow this thing down. That outbound ship's only doing 4 or 5 knots. It weighs probably 130, 140,000 tonne. It's only a smaller one. And that would take everything working 2 ship lengths to pull up. So it's starting to get to, that would be a 5 short blasting right there. He is going to go out of sight within a minute or so, and that's when it becomes anyone's game. The acceptable passing distances from ships, Jack touched on that before. Look, the figures contained in the sailing instructions are perfect. Just stick with that. 500 metres, 50 metres, and the ferry ones as well. If you stick with that, nobody could have any complaints there as well. It's just more a matter of being aware that if you are crossing in front of, especially an inbound ship, that inbound ship is coming towards you quite quickly as well. So that passing distance will gradually decrease as you cross in front of them. Where do I find the shipping schedule? It's available publicly. If you type in Port Authority shipping schedule for Newcastle, it's on the net. It's quite often worth it. Not many ships go in now the basin area, but they do, as we've all seen. That's a really good guide to see what ships are moving and where they're going to go as well. Yeah, just encourage everybody before you check the weather when you go out in on the harbour, check the shipping schedule as well. It'll just give you an idea. Some days there's not many at all, and other days there could be 24, 26 movements in a day, and yeah, you're going to tangle with some, or you're going to see some ships during that time. VHF channels to monitor. Jack may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of the working channels are done on channel 77 through the Yacht Club. The main channel that the Newcastle Harbour works on is channel 9, and they use channel 9 to talk to all the ships with pilot boarding ground instructions and bits and pieces. That can get quite busy, so it's probably not worth hanging around on the background, but just double check that the working channel on your race day is 77, because that's the race officer will be on that one. 77 is also one of the working channels for the port as well. If there's more than 4 ships moving, we'll be on channel 77 as well, and there may be a conflict there. It doesn't happen very often, but it's just something to be aware of. If you start hearing a pilot talking to tugs on 77, then we need to look at a different channel for that time. And what to do in the case of an incident? Well, if it's a Newcastle run race, first point of contact is the race officer, and lodge it from there. They'll be able to guide you as to how serious it was, whether a report has to be made to Maritime, and then they'll quite often escalate it up to Port Authority if it needs to be. Really, really rare that it gets to that point, and something we hope doesn't happen. But incidents do happen, and there is a reporting sequence. But the race officer is your first point of contact on that one. All right, I've run out of slideshow. Let's hope I haven't run out of viewers yet, because I can't tell. I can't see who's here at all. So I might hand you back to Jack, who can take over the presenter. Thanks very much, guys, and I hope to see you out in the water again soon.
Thanks, Mark. That was great. And you kept all of our audience too. We've still got 42 watching. We did have one question come in earlier, Mark. I'm not sure if you're still there, but someone was asking what was the distance for the dredge, the David Allen. What would you recommend keeping clear of him?
Yeah, keep the same distances as the ferry. Treat him as the ferry. He's highly manoeuvrable. He's got twin AZ pods on the back of him. He does move quite quick. He does up to 10 knots throughout the harbour, both in and out. So just be aware that he's moving quickly. But if you stick to that, his blind spots are obviously a lot less than the ship. He is quite manoeuvrable. So if you stick to, I think it was 200 metres you had listed with the ferry, you'll be fine for that. Yep.
Yeah. I think you answered my other questions that I was going to bring up. When you're entering a ship and you're entering at Nobbies, how far ahead are you looking at a vessel in the channel that's making you nervous?
Oh, yeah, no, good point. I'm looking all the way through to the Basin Cut. I know that's where most of my trouble comes from, is over there. So everyone's looking. The height of eye can be up 40, 50 metres. We've got a fantastic view. And we can see yachts heading out in the basin. We can see them coming past Destiny there, and that's when we start to go, right, just keep an eye on it. Quite often the tugs will call up saying, oh, there's a couple of boats coming. So that mile and a half, the main problem for us is from Nobbies through to just past Dyke Point there. Once we're past there, well, our speeds are normally a lot lower and the traffic is a lot less. It's just that high traffic area where we're all trying to share the same bit of water. But yeah, we're not getting nervous yet, but we are interested in what your moves are. So if I see a yacht coming out of the basin and he's starting to skim the south side and he's starting to hug the reds and then starting to creep out, I'm comfortable. If I see him come out of the basin and cut straight across the channel to the north side, I'm happy. It's all good. It's the ones that come dawdling straight up the middle of the channel and they could go either way, like rabbit in the headlights. That's when they start getting us a bit nervous.
Yeah, cool. And as you already touched on, there is space available outside the channel, up both sides, aren't there?
heaps of water there, more than we think actually. So you think where the David Allen runs, he runs up that south side all the time, and there is some shallow spots, and obviously you guys are very close to different drafts. Know your boat, know your draft, and know where you can go outside the channel.
Yeah, fantastic. I think, okay, we've got one more question for you before we wrap it up. We've got a question here. Could you outline the various departure timeframes from various berths? So you know, whether it's where it's coming from down the harbour, how long it might take to get to the Horseshoe.
Yeah, okay, that's a good one. So anything that, if you're looking at the shipping schedule, anything that's got a Kooragang, there's a K berth, you're looking half an hour from when it's departing from the berth, it's in the Horseshoe. If you're looking at anything from a Dyke berth, you're generally 15 minutes, it's in the Horseshoe. Inbounds are going to be the same every time, sort of 15 minutes from the entrance to out of the way for you guys. It's only about a mile down to there. That's pretty broad, and obviously depends on drafts and bits and pieces. But if you stick to that, then yeah, you're on the money. And I guess it's a good time to say that there are no silly questions. So I'm not a big believer in, if you've got any questions at all, doesn't matter if you think it sounds stupid, just now is a good time to ask them.
I think that's all we've got, Mark.
We've exhausted them. All right, done.
Alrighty, so I'm going to say thank you very much. Thank you to everyone watching. And next week we're back. We've got Damo on board for the Racing Rules of Sailing. So see you all next Monday for Masterclass Mondays. Good night.